Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling thinking fast and slow.
Yeah,
That's psychology.
that's a big one.
Heavyweight,
Yeah.
by a Nobel Prize winner, Daniel Kahneman.
Yeah. It's considered a classic for a reason,
Mm-hmm.
you know? The book dives deep into how our minds work, exposing the fascinating and sometimes frustrating ways
Oh, yeah.
we make judgments and decisions.
I've got excerpts and notes from your deep dive requests ready to go.
Great.
And I have to say, even just prepping for this, I had a few, wait, I totally do that, moments just in the prep.
You know what's so captivating about this book is
Yeah.
how Kahneman takes decades of research and presents it in a way that's both insightful and entertaining. He
Yes.
really challenges us to question our assumptions about how we think.
Okay, let's jump right in. The foundation of the book is this idea of two systems of thinking, System 1 and System 2. Kahneman describes them almost like two characters in our minds,
Yeah.
each with its own distinct personality.
It's a powerful analogy. System 1 is the impulsive one, fast, intuitive, and driven by emotion.
Right.
It operates automatically and effortlessly, like recognizing a familiar face or understanding simple language.
Right.
It's also the system that jumps to conclusions and makes those snap judgments
Yeah.
we sometimes regret later.
Yes, absolutely.
And then there's System 2, the more thoughtful and deliberate one.
Mhm.
This is the system that gets called upon for complex problem solving, figuring out a tricky tip at a restaurant with a big group, or,
Yeah.
as Kahneman puts it, trying to park in a tight space.
Yeah.
Have you ever had that one?
Oh, totally.
God always gets me.
Parking in a tight space.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Or like parallel parking on a busy street.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's all System 2.
that's so true.
You really have to, engage.
Yeah, you have to turn off the radio
Yeah.
so you can concentrate.
Yeah. Put your phone down.
It's really interesting to consider how these systems interact.
Yeah.
Imagine them as a sort of dynamic duo.
Yeah.
System 1 is constantly scanning the environment,
Right.
making quick assessment,
Yeah.
while System 2 is there to provide a more reasoned and analytical perspective when needed.
Yes.
But the catch is that System 2 is a bit lazy
Yeah.
and easily depleted.
Yes. It takes effort to engage System 2,
Right.
and it has limited resources.
One of the ways Kahneman illustrates this is through the Muller-Lyer illusion.
Oh.
You've probably seen it.
Yeah.
Two lines that are the same length,
Yeah.
but one appears longer because of the arrows at the ends.
Yes. I've definitely fallen for that one before.
Even when you know the lines are the same length,
Yeah.
System 1 can't help but be fooled by those arrows.
It's powerful.
It highlights how powerful and persistent System 1 can be.
That's right.
Exactly. And it demonstrates how our perception can be easily manipulated even when we consciously know better.
Yeah.
Kahneman also uses some clever experiments to show the strain on System 2. He describes these add 1 and add 3 tasks,
Yeah.
where participants have to do simple addition problems.
Uh-huh.
As more digits are added, the tasks become increasingly difficult, and researchers actually measured people's pupils dilating and their heart rate increasing.
Wow. So it's not just a feeling of mental effort. There's
Yeah.
an actual physiological response.
Precisely. And this limited capacity of System 2 can lead to what Kahneman calls cognitive blindness.
Cognitive blindness. That sounds a bit unsettling.
It is. Think of the famous invisible gorilla experiment,
Okay.
where people watching a basketball game are so focused on counting passes
Yeah.
that they completely miss a gorilla walking through the scene.
Oh, I remember that one.
It's amazing how we can be completely oblivious to something right in front of us.
Right.
That's the power of selective attention and the limitations of System 2.
Yeah.
When our mental resources are stretched thin, we can become blind to even the most obvious stimuli.
Uh-huh.
Kahneman even cites a study where participants missed the letter K during the add 1 task.
Wow.
Their focus was so intense
Okay.
that they literally became blind to other visual information.
That's a pretty powerful illustration of
Yeah.
how cognitive load can impact our awareness.
Yeah, it raises some fascinating questions.
Yeah.
If we can miss a gorilla in plain sight, what else might we be missing in our daily lives?
Yeah.
And how can we learn to be more aware of these potential blind spots?
That's a great point.
It seems like understanding the interplay between System 1 and System 2
Right.
is crucial for understanding how we perceive and interact with the world around us.
Absolutely. And this understanding has implications for everything from decision-making to how we design public spaces and even how we communicate with each other.
Now that we've laid the groundwork with System 1 and System 2, let's delve into how these systems influence our judgments and decisions,
Right.
especially when System 1's shortcuts lead to predictable errors. These shortcuts, or heuristics as Kahneman calls them,
Right.
are the mental rules of thumb that help us navigate the complexities of life.
Yeah.
They allow us to make quick judgments without getting bogged down in endless analysis.
Right.
But the downside is they can also lead to systematic errors or biases in our thinking.
So it's like our brains are trying to be efficient,
Yeah.
but sometimes they end up taking shortcuts that lead to the wrong destination.
Exactly. And one of the most fascinating aspects of Kahneman's work is how he reveals these biases,
Yes.
showing us just how predictable and pervasive they are.
Yeah.
He starts by discussing priming, this idea that recent exposures can unconsciously influence our thoughts and behaviors.
Yeah.
He describes a study where participants exposed to money-related words were less likely to help a stranger who dropped their pencils. Just thinking about money made them less helpful.
That's wild. I wouldn't think exposure to certain words would have that kind of impact on behavior.
It's remarkable, isn't it? And it highlights how our subconscious minds are constantly absorbing information and shaping our responses, often without our awareness.
Right.
Then there's cognitive ease, which is essentially how effortlessly our brains process information. Things that are easy to process, like repetition, rhyming, or clear fonts,
Yeah.
tend to feel more true and familiar, even if they're not.
So our brains equate fluency with truth. Like if something sounds good, it must be true.
It's a bit more nuanced than that. But essentially, yes, our brains are wired to conserve energy. So anything that's easy to process
Right.
gets a sort of mental shortcut. We tend to trust information that feels familiar or effortless, even if that familiarity is based on something as superficial as a catchy rhyme.
That explains why marketing slogans are often so repetitive and simple. They're designed to exploit our cognitive ease.
Precisely. And this principle applies to all sorts of information.
Right.
From news headlines to political speeches. The easier something is to process, the more likely we are to believe it, even if it's completely false.
It's almost like we're being tricked by our own brains.
In a way, yes.
Okay.
By understanding these mechanisms, we can become more critical consumers of information and less susceptible to manipulation. Another bias Kahneman explores is the halo effect, where our overall impression of a person influences how we judge their specific traits.
So if we find someone attractive, we're more likely to assume they're also intelligent and trustworthy.
Exactly. It's like our brains create a sort of mental halo around people we like, and that halo colors our perception of everything they do.
Right.
And this bias can have a significant impact on our decisions.
Yeah.
From who we vote for to who we hire.
It makes you wonder how much of our judgment is truly objective.
Yes.
And how much is based on these unconscious biases.
It's a humbling thought, isn't it? But again, awareness is key.
Yeah.
By recognizing these biases, we can take steps to mitigate their influence. Let's move on to the availability heuristic, which describes how we judge the frequency or likelihood of events based on how easily examples come to mind. Kahneman uses the example of people asked to recall assertive behaviors. Those who struggle to come up with examples rated themselves as less assertive, even if their actual behavior was no different.
So if something is easy to recall,
Yeah.
we assume it's more common or likely to happen.
Exactly. It's like our brains are using a mental shortcut.
Okay.
If something pops into our minds easily, it must be important or representative.
It's fascinating how our memories can shape our perception of reality.
It is. And this can have real-world consequences. For example, if we're constantly bombarded with news about crime, we might overestimate the likelihood of becoming a victim of crime ourselves, even if crime rates are actually declining.
It seems like understanding these heuristics and biases is crucial for making sound judgments and decisions.
Absolutely. And perhaps the most mind-blowing bias Kahneman reveals is the anchoring effect.
Okay.
He describes an experiment where participants spun a wheel of fortune and then estimated the percentage of African nations in the UN. Believe it or not, their estimates were influenced by the random number on the wheel.
Wait, so even though the wheel had absolutely nothing to do with African nations,
Nothing.
their brains latched onto that random number as a reference point.
That's exactly what happened. The anchoring effect demonstrates how susceptible we are to irrelevant information.
Okay.
Just being exposed to a number can influence our judgments, even if we know it's completely arbitrary.
So our brains are constantly searching for anchors.
It seems so.
Even when those anchors make no logical sense.
It seems so. And this has implications for everything from negotiating salaries to making purchasing decisions.
Right.
Marketers and salespeople often exploit the anchoring effect by setting high initial prices or presenting us with inflated figures.
It's amazing how easily we can be manipulated
Right.
without even realizing it.
That's the danger of these biases.
Yeah.
They operate beneath the surface, shaping our thoughts and behaviors without our conscious awareness.
So what can we do about it?
Right.
Are we doomed to be puppets of our own cognitive biases?
Not necessarily. While we can't eliminate these biases entirely, we can learn to recognize them and take steps to mitigate their influence.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are some strategies for fighting back against these mental shortcuts?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Kahneman offers several practical suggestions, but we'll save those for part 2 of our deep dive. For now, let's just sit with the unsettling realization that our thinking is far less rational and objective than we might like to believe.
I'm ready to dive deeper. This is already making me question everything I thought I knew about my own mind.
That's exactly the point of thinking fast and slow.
Yeah.
It's a journey of self-discovery, challenging us to confront the quirks and limitations of our own thinking. And it's only by understanding these limitations that we can begin to make more informed and deliberate choices. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll explore Kahneman's strategies for overcoming our biases and making better decisions. Picking up where we left off, I'm eager to hear about these strategies Kahneman suggests for navigating these mental pitfalls.
Well, he starts by tackling this idea of regression to the mean.
Okay.
It's a statistical phenomenon where extreme outcomes, whether positive or negative, tend to be followed by less extreme ones.
So it's like if you have an amazing meal at a restaurant, the next time you go, it's probably going to be a little less amazing. Not because the restaurant's quality changed, but just because it's statistically improbable to have 2 extraordinary experiences in a row.
That's a great analogy. And Kahneman illustrates this concept with the example of flight instructors who mistakenly believe that praise makes cadets perform worse and criticism improves them.
Interesting, because after an exceptionally good performance, statistically, the next one is likely to be closer to average.
Exactly.
Regardless of the instructor's feedback.
The instructors aren't accounting for regression to the mean.
Right.
So they misinterpret the cause and effect.
It makes you wonder how many of our everyday judgments are clouded by this tendency to see patterns where there's only statistical fluctuation.
Yeah, it's a crucial point, especially when we're evaluating performance or predicting future outcomes. Kahneman emphasizes the importance of considering the outside view to counteract this bias.
The outside view, what does that entail?
Instead of just focusing on the specific situation at hand, we should look at similar situations and their outcomes.
So instead of relying solely on my gut feeling about how long a project will take, I should consider how long similar projects have taken in the past.
That's the idea. This outside view helps us avoid the planning fallacy, which is our persistent tendency to underestimate the time and resources needed for a project.
I am so guilty of that one.
We all do it.
I always think I can accomplish more in a day than is humanly possible.
It's a classic example of how our inside view, our narrow focus on the specifics of our own situation, can blind us to the bigger picture.
So incorporating the outside view can help us make more realistic plans and avoid those frustrating delays.
Absolutely. And it can also help us make better decisions in other areas of life, like investing or even choosing a romantic partner.
Interesting.
It's all about broadening our perspective and considering a wider range of possibilities.
Now, another major pitfall Kahneman highlights is overconfidence. He points out how experts, despite their deep knowledge and experience, are often overly confident in their predictions, even when their track record is dismal.
I guess it's easy to get caught up in your own expertise.
Right.
And assume you have a better grasp of the future than you actually do.
Exactly. Kahneman cites a fascinating study of political pundits who were asked to predict future events. Their performance was no better than chance.
Wow.
They were essentially making random guesses.
So even experts can be completely wrong.
Yeah.
And they often don't even realize it.
It's a humbling reminder that we're all susceptible to overconfidence.
Yeah.
Especially when we're dealing with complex and unpredictable systems.
And this brings us to another thought-provoking point.
Okay.
Algorithms versus intuition.
Okay.
Kahneman argues that algorithms, despite their perceived coldness and impersonality, often outperform human judgment even in complex domains.
algorithms. So we're talking about computer programs making decisions.
Exactly. Algorithms are sets of rules that can be used to make predictions or decisions.
Okay.
And they're often more accurate than humans.
Right.
Especially when it comes to things like medical diagnosis or loan applications.
But there's a lot of resistance to using algorithms in these sensitive areas.
Yeah.
People feel like it takes the human element out of the equation.
That's true. There's a perception that algorithms are cold and unfeeling, while humans can bring empathy and intuition to the decision-making process.
Right.
But the reality is, our intuitions are often unreliable and influenced by all those biases we've been discussing. Right. Algorithms, on the other hand, can help us make more objective and data-driven decisions.
Yes.
Potentially leading to fairer and more equitable outcomes.
It's a fascinating dilemma, balancing the efficiency and objectivity of algorithms with the human need for empathy and understanding.
It's a conversation we need to be having as algorithms become increasingly integrated into our lives.
Yes.
Kahneman's work provides a valuable framework for understanding the strengths and limitations of both human judgment and algorithmic decision-making.
Now, shifting gears a bit.
Okay.
Kahneman also delves into this fascinating concept of the two selves.
Okay.
The experiencing self and the remembering self.
Intriguing. Tell me more about these two selves.
The experiencing self is the one that lives in the present moment.
Okay.
Feeling the immediate sensations of our experiences. It's the self that feels the pain of a cold shower or the joy of a delicious meal.
And the remembering self is the one that reflects on those experiences later.
Yes.
Shaping our memories and narratives.
Exactly. And here's the kicker.
Okay.
These two selves don't always agree. Our memories of experiences are not always accurate reflections of how we felt during those experiences.
So how we remember something isn't necessarily how we actually experienced it in the moment.
That's right. And Kahneman highlights this through the peak-end rule, which states that our memory of an experience is disproportionately influenced by its peak, the most intense moment, and its end, rather than the overall duration or average intensity.
So if a movie has an amazing climax and a happy ending,
Right.
we'll remember it as a good movie,
Yeah.
even if the first hour was a snooze fest.
Exactly. And Kahneman describes a study where people had to submerge their hand in ice water.
Okay.
They actually preferred a longer, colder experience simply because it ended with less pain.
That's wild. It's like our remembering selves are choosing to ignore the actual duration of the experience.
Yes.
And just focus on the highlights in the finale.
It's a fascinating insight into how our memories are constructed and how they shape our perception of the past.
And this has implications for how we evaluate our lives as a whole, right?
Absolutely. Kahneman argues that our overall happiness is not a simple sum of our experiences. It's more like a story we construct based on selected memories.
So we're not always the best judges of our own happiness.
We might think we are, but our memories can be deceiving.
Okay.
We tend to focus on certain memories, often the most intense or recent ones.
Right.
And those memories disproportionately influence our overall perception of our lives.
This explains why we sometimes make decisions that seem irrational in hindsight.
Right.
We're basing our choices on faulty memories and inaccurate predictions about how we'll feel in the future.
It's a powerful realization.
Yeah.
And it leads to another important concept Kahneman explores, miswanting.
Miswanting, what does that mean?
It's essentially the idea that we make bad choices based on inaccurate predictions of our future happiness. We overspend on material possessions, underestimate the value of experiences, and generally make choices that don't actually lead to long-term fulfillment.
So it's like we're chasing after things we think will make us happy,
Right.
but when we finally get them, the happiness doesn't last.
That's the essence of miswanting. We're driven by desires that are often based on faulty assumptions about what will bring us lasting satisfaction.
It's a sobering thought, but also empowering.
Yes.
If we can learn to recognize these patterns of miswanting, we can start to make choices
Right.
that are more aligned with our true values and goals.
Exactly. And that's where the real power of thinking fast and slow lies.
Yeah.
It's not just about exposing our cognitive biases. It's about providing us with the tools to make better decisions and live more fulfilling lives.
So it's like a user manual for our own minds,
Right.
helping us understand the quirks and limitations of our thinking so we can operate more effectively in the world.
That's a great way to put it. It's about recognizing that we're not always rational actors,
Right.
but we can learn to navigate the complexities of our minds and make choices that lead to greater happiness and well-being.
Now, I know we're just scratching the surface of this book,
Yeah.
but I'm already feeling a shift in my own thinking.
Yeah.
It's like I'm seeing the world through a new lens, more aware of the hidden forces that shape my perceptions and decisions.
That's the beauty of Kahneman's work. It's a journey of self-discovery, challenging us to confront our own cognitive biases and to approach the world with a healthy dose of skepticism.
And this awareness is the first step towards making more deliberate and informed choices.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But there's so much more to explore in Thinking Fast and Slow.
Right.
In part 3 of our deep dive, we'll delve into the implications of Kahneman's work
Okay.
for things like public policy, behavioral economics, and even our understanding of morality.
I can't wait. This is definitely a deep dive that keeps on giving.
It's amazing to think how much ground we've covered already in this deep dive into Thinking Fast and Slow.
And yet there's still so much more to uncover.
Yeah.
I'm particularly intrigued by how Kahneman's insights apply to areas like public policy and behavioral economics.
Yeah, it's fascinating how this book, which started as an exploration of individual psychology, has had such a profound impact on our understanding of how societies function, like how whole groups of people make decisions.
One of the key takeaways is that we're not always the rational actors that traditional economics assumes we are.
Right. Like the perfect economic human.
Yeah, Kahneman challenges this notion of the perfectly rational econ, arguing that we're actually humans, driven by emotions biases and those pesky mental shortcuts we've been discussing.
All those irrationalities.
Yeah, this realization has led to the rise of behavioral economics, which takes a more realistic view of human decision-making.
Right, it's all about acknowledging that our choices are often influenced by factors beyond pure logic and self-interest.
Right. And this understanding has profound implications for how we design policies and interventions.
Absolutely. Kahneman's work has been instrumental in the development of nudging, which uses insights from behavioral economics to encourage people to make choices that are beneficial for themselves and society.
Right. So instead of relying on mandates or prohibitions, nudging aims to gently guide people towards desired outcomes.
Exactly. Think of things like making healthy food more prominent in cafeterias or automatically enrolling employees in retirement savings plans.
Yeah, it's about structuring choices in a way that makes it easier for people to make decisions that align with their long-term goals.
It sounds almost like a form of benevolent manipulation.
It's a delicate balance, for sure.
Right.
There are ethical considerations to keep in mind.
Yes.
But the goal is to empower people to make informed decisions, not to coerce them into certain behaviors.
Right. And it's fascinating how effective these subtle nudges can be in shaping our choices.
Kahneman's work has shown that even small changes in the way options are presented or framed can have a significant impact on our decisions.
It's a reminder that we're not always in control of our choices as we think we are. And this brings us to another fascinating aspect of Thinking Fast and Slow, the exploration of loss aversion.
Loss aversion, what's that about?
It's the idea that we feel the pain of a loss more intensely than the pleasure of an equivalent gain.
So losing $100 feels worse.
Way worse.
Than gaining $100.
Exactly. And this asymmetry in our emotional responses has a profound impact on our risk-taking behavior.
Okay.
We're more likely to take risks to avoid losses than to achieve gains.
It's like we're wired to protect what we have.
Yes.
Even if it means missing out on potential opportunities.
And this has implications for everything from investing to negotiating salaries.
Right.
Kahneman also delves into prospect theory, which challenges traditional economic models by proposing that our decisions are influenced by how potential gains and losses are framed.
So it's not just about the absolute value of what we stand to gain or lose, but how those outcomes are presented to us.
Precisely. For example, we're more likely to choose a sure gain of $50 over a 50% chance of winning $100, even though the expected value is the same.
Yeah, it seems irrational.
It does.
But our brains are wired to prioritize certainty over uncertainty, even when it means settling for a smaller reward.
Right, and this tendency to be swayed by framing effects has significant implications for marketing, advertising, and even political campaigns.
Sure, it's all about understanding how to present information in a way that resonates with our emotional biases.
Right, and this brings us to the final and perhaps most profound implication of Kahneman's work: the challenge to our understanding of morality.
It's fascinating how a book about cognitive biases can lead us to question the very foundations of our ethical beliefs.
Yeah, Kahneman argues that our moral judgments are often influenced by emotions and intuitions rather than reasoned deliberation.
So our gut feelings about right and wrong
Yeah.
aren't always reliable.
They can be misleading. Kahneman describes experiments where people's moral judgments were swayed by factors like disgust or empathy, even when those emotions were irrelevant to the ethical dilemma at hand. Right. So it just shows you that our sense of justice can be clouded by factors beyond our conscious control.
Yeah, and this raises some important questions about how we make moral decisions, both individually and as a society.
It challenges us to examine our own biases and to strive for a more rational and compassionate approach to ethical dilemmas.
It seems like Thinking Fast and Slow is not just a book about psychology.
It's about life.
Yeah, it's a book about what it means to be human.
Yes, a deep dive into the complexities of our minds, revealing our strengths, our weaknesses, and the hidden forces that shape our thoughts and actions.
And it's by understanding these complexities that we can begin to make more informed decisions, live more fulfilling lives, and create a more just and compassionate world.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time for us to surface from this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've explored the two systems of thinking, the biases that can lead us astray, and the strategies for navigating those biases. We've delved into the implications of Kahneman's work for public policy, behavioral economics, and even our understanding of morality.
It's been quite a journey.
It has, and I hope you've come away with a newfound appreciation for the complexities of your own mind.
And a healthy dose of skepticism about your own intuitions.
Exactly. Remember, what you see is not always all there is.
Keep questioning.
Keep questioning.
Keep exploring and keep diving deep into the mysteries of your own thinking.
Until next time, deep divers.